Everybody wants a full, abundant, rich life. It's no fun just dragging along from day to day. Why not live exuberantly? That's why we're on a series here that has to do with that kind of life that we're talking about. A life that's full, rich, and abundant. How do you live this kind of life? Well, this is number 5 in this series. And number 5, the rule is draw strength and health from Jesus. There's our source. It's amazing how much the Bible has to say about our bodies and our health. We get sick, it's true. You've been sick. Are you well now? Well, if you've been sick and now you're well, you have been healed, either suddenly or slowly, but you have been healed. And that healing comes from God. If it's amazing, we just take it for granted. We don't think about it. If you're cut and bleeding, that wound is closed up. The bleeding stops. It scabs over. There's healing. The scab is gone, and everything is back to where it was before. How does that take place? Well, God has made our bodies so that healing takes place. And we read in Exodus chapter 15, verse 26, I am the Lord who heals you. Yes, he does. And health comes from him. And that is just the way it works. Now, what about doctors? What about medicine? What about hospitals? God may work through means, or he may work directly. Our family has had 3 family doctors through the years. What happened? Why 3? Well, one after the other. They died on us. So doctors don't have all the answers. They die too, like everybody else. Our first doctor was Dr. Gasteyer in Oak Lawn, a good man with lots of common sense. As we raised our family in the city of Chicago, 2 blocks from our house was the office of a fine Lithuanian doctor, Dr. Josephicus. We'd take 3 of the kids in there for, quote, school exams. He'd check to see that each was breathing and then sign the papers, yes. And he took good, but Dr. Josephicus died of cancer. He's gone. Then our family doctor was Dr. Nelson, a good Christian man who was a member of Elam Baptist Church. Once when I was in with him with my wife at his office in Oak Lawn, I asked him, and he was nearing retirement at the time, a long life, I don't know how many thousands of patients he had had over the years. And I asked him, what percentage of these physical ailments, these physical problems, medical difficulties that people have, what percentage of them is the real root cause? Not something physical, but something emotional and something mental. It didn't take him long to answer. He said, 70% of the problems, the medical problems that people come to me with start with bad thinking and upset emotions. How true. So if the head works right, if the heart works right, then you see the health will be on the agenda for sure. I have a little book that I got I got it in 1966, but it was written in 1963. Dr. S.I. McMillan. It's titled None of These Diseases. And listen to a couple of the very profitable little volume. Some of the chapter headings. Here's one chapter, Upset Mind, Sick Body. Oh, just like Dr. Nelson said. And here's another chapter. It's not what you eat, it's what eats you. Oh, yeah. And another chapter, the high cost of getting even. Another, love or perish. Another one, cutting man's fears, greatest fears, down to size. Now, that book sold and sold and sold. And finally, Dr. McMillan's grandson picked it up, revised it, brought it up to date, and his grandson is Dr. Stern, who has his office in Illinois here, out near Belvedere. And he kept the title, None of These Diseases, revised it, brought it up to date. And I'm acquainted with Dr. Stern. And the book has sold, between the two of them, way over a million copies. Oh, what's it all about? That how you feel and how you think impacts your health situation. Oh, yes, it does, for sure. And that's what the Bible said all along. Where is it? Proverbs 23, verse 7. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What does the Bible mean by heart? Well, that's really you. It's your mind, it's your emotions, it's your thinking, it's your perspective, it's your view on life. It's the heart wraps it all up together. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. It's amazing how much control your thinking has with how you feel and how you're doing physically. Another one is, let's see, Proverbs 4:23. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So, how you think, how you feel. If you hate somebody, oh my, the other fellow probably doesn't even know it. It doesn't hurt him. It's not bothering him. But the hatred can destroy, not the hated one, but the hater can be destroyed. You have a sour experience in life. Don't we all hit a bad one now and then? It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it that makes a difference. Do you get bitter when you've been shortchanged, bitter when you've been lied to, bitter when you've been abused, mishandled, taken advantage of. You can't afford to be bitter. The bitterness will not destroy anyone else, but it will destroy you. You can't afford to be bitter like this. It just does not work. Stress is another factor. Now, without stress, we can't live. So moderate stress gets you out of bed in the morning and on your way to work. Moderate stress makes you shovel the snow instead of waiting for it to melt. Moderate stress helps you to cut the grass so your neighbors don't get up on your case for growing weeds in your lot. Moderate stress is good. But stress can creep up on us so that inadvertently, almost unawares, we get stress beyond what is good for us. It happens to every one of us. It was back in 2014 that my wife, Ruth, began to, old age was catching up with her, and she could do less and less. And as she did less and less around the house, I picked up, still kept on with pastoring a church, but did more and more. Finally, I realized that I could not do all the things at home and keep on pastoring. It was either get some help or resign from the pastorate. Got some help. Our daughter Martha moved in with us and took over things just fine. But still, there was some burden on me, of course. And it was on March 5th in 2015 that my wife tangled her foot in a telephone cord, fell and broke her femur. Well, that was the beginning of downhill. So it was the hospital, and then surgery following, and then the nursing home. And it was just one thing after another. And finally, on April the 4th in 2015, my wife went on to heaven. All up to that time, I had kept pastoring a sizable church, and it was just a heavy load. But I somehow kept going by the grace of God. It wasn't long after that, her death in June, that our long-time treasured missionary, Alexander de Chalando, died. And so one day, I'm flying to France. His funeral's the next day. The next day, I'm flying back. And I didn't realize it, that all of these things, though I kept going, were taking their toll on me, one after the other. And it was in August of 2015 that I went to a conference in North Carolina. And returning from that conference, while I was in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, I had a massive heart attack, ended up in the hospital. Looking back over surveying it, what really was the cause of that? I'd not had any heart trouble before. No one in our family had had any heart trouble. What what was this going on? Stress, that was it. It finally gets more than you can handle, and it takes its toll out on you physically. That's what takes place. And so you have to trust the Lord and stay with it. There's no question. He'll see you through. I asked the doctor, the cardiologist in Murfreesboro, how bad this heart attack was. He told me, and I asked him again, why am I still alive? He said, I don't know. But our lives are moment by moment, day by day, in the hands of God. He watches over us. He takes care of us. It's good to have joy. There's a connection between happiness and health. Miserable people are usually people who often are battling with illness along life's way. But if you can have the joy of the Lord in your heart, then that makes a difference for sure. And it keeps you going. The joy of the Lord is your strength, says the scripture in Nehemiah 18. A happy person stands a much better opportunity to be a healthy person. And then to Proverbs again. Proverbs 17, verse 22. It's very explicit. A merry heart is like a good medicine. It is. If you can be on the bright side of life, it makes a lot of difference. The Apostle Paul is worth looking at when we discuss this subject of our health, because he was a driven man. He just kept going and going and going. He did not know when to stop. He did not know when to let up. He did not know when to slow down. He just kept going. In fact, you know that he had a personal physician, Luke, who traveled with him to mend him when there was trouble and difficulty. Yes, that's what took place with him. What kept him going so? He had a purpose in life. Philippians 3:13, this one thing I do. He gave his life to the Lord and lived for Jesus, and that's what kept him going. Yes, it did. Self-pity, you do not find a trace of it in his life. No. And did he feel that the world owed him something, that other people were indebted to him? Not at all. He said, we read it in Romans 1:14. He said, I am a debtor. Nobody owes me anything, but I owe a lot of people. The Greeks, the barbarians, he owed them the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he did his best to go with them and take the gospel to them. Now, he had some problems. He tells us in 2 Corinthians 12, he had a thorn in the flesh. And I don't want to get involved in this speculation. He doesn't say what it was. He doesn't go into detail. But he had it. It was something, obviously, that was chronic. It was not a come and go kind of illness, but something that stayed with him. But he heard the Lord say, My grace is sufficient for thee, and my strength is made perfect in weakness. And so whatever this physical malady that Paul had, it did not seemingly slow him down. He just kept going. He's on his first missionary journey, Acts chapter 14. He's in the town of Lystra. Some ruffians came from a couple other cities and ended up turning the people against him. They stoned him, a preacher of the gospel, a good heart, a good missionary. And they took a look at him and they said, he's gone. And they dragged him out of the city so they wouldn't have the corpse lying in the street in Lystra. The believers gathered around him. He got up and went back into the city where they had stoned him. And the next day, he's, after being stoned to what they thought was to death, he got up the next day and went by foot on the Roman road to Derby. 40 miles away he's going, and he just keeps going. So even with chronic illness, which apparently the Lord, he prayed, but the Lord did not see fit to take it away from him. No, so he lived with it. And it may be that you have some disability, some chronic physical problem, a thorn in the flesh, like Paul. Well, a good attitude will lead to a good life in spite of what you have to suffer with along the way. But be cheerful about it. Don't get down. Don't pity yourself. Don't get into the why me mood. Don't keep asking questions. Insofar as you can, ignore what's wrong physically, medically, and go on living. Don't camp in the doctor's office. Doctors are good. If you have a broken leg, you need to have it set. But don't spend time in a doctor's office. It's an unhealthy place. All the people in there are sick, and so why spend time there? Stay away from the hospital if you can avoid it, yes. It's full of sick people. It's not a healthy place. Imagine with me for a moment here that Jesus is building you a house. Not in heaven. Imagine with me for a moment here now. On earth, walls, windows, doors, a roof, a house. And before he lets you in this house, he has the key he's going to give you. He wants a commitment from you, saying to you before you go in this house that I have built for you. Don't go in with any bad stuff. There's a trash can outside the door. All the bitterness, all the hatred, all the self-pity goes in the trash can. Then you can go into the house. Will you take the key? Will you unload all the bad stuff? Will you go into the house? There's a little song that's been with the Lord's people for quite some time. It goes like this. In my Father's house, in my Father's house, There is joy, joy, joy. Come and go with me to my Father's house, where there's joy, joy, joy. Jesus is the way, yes, to my Father's house. To my Father's house, oh, to my Father's house. Jesus is the way to my Father's house. There is joy, joy, joy. Yes, that's all for you, my friend. A life of joy. When you get rid of the bad stuff, unload all the trash. Satan wants to load your life with trash and the garbage of sin. And if you don't get rid of it, if you don't confess your sin to the Lord and take Jesus as your Savior, then there's no joy. And you'll pay for it, yes, with health problems as well. You'll be a regular at the doctor. At a recent social gathering, a doctor came up and introduced himself. He knew me, and I had met him years ago but forgotten who he was. And he said to me as we were having conversation and recalling some of the past, he said, "Who is your doctor? Who is your doctor?" And I said, "I don't have one." He looked at me and said, you should have one. We need the money." Oh my, no. But in my Father's house, in my Father's house, there is joy, joy, joy. Come and go with me to my Father's house. Sing it with me now. Everything's all right in my Father's house, in my Father's house, in my Father's house. Everything's all right in my Father's house. There is joy, joy, joy.
Whatever happens, I'll give thanks to you. Whatever happens, I know your love will see me through. I offer my heart, seen the very least